So, Dan, about this time last year on the podcast, we were talking about a festival feast and a blockbuster famine. So there were lots of festival movies around, but nothing really on the horizon. How's it looking this year?
Well, it was a festival lineup that we were looking at, right?
Yeah.
It's a feast this year's, but more of a banquet.
Well, right.
Which I'm pretty pumped about. We can set that aside and come back to the festival thing.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of the blockbuster famine, that's kind of gone. The only looming concern is what's going to happen with pictures coming up for the next 6 months.
True.
The writers' strike and the actors' strike. But look, the lineup is looking fantastic. And if we sort of skip a little bit in terms of time from now and look ahead to summer as a really good example. Last summer, we had Avatar: Way of the Water, which I also really enjoyed, despite my misgivings about Avatar film.
Yeah.
And then we had Puss in Boots and then Banshees of Inisherin were our 3 top titles. All really good films. But what that tells you is that you hit the 3rd biggest film of the summer, and it's essentially a dark black comedy Irish art house film with incredible acting, and it's a brilliant film, I personally believe. But for last year, that really summed up the lack of big pictures that we had, and also the mid-range films, which I'll loop back to as well. This summer we have, in late November, all going well, we've got the new Trolls film, World Tour, we've got Napoleon from Ridley Scott with Joaquin Phoenix. Hitting the start of December, we've got Taika Waititi's new film, Next Goal Wins.
Yeah.
Then the following week, we've got Wonka with Timothée Chalamet and the makers of the Paddington films. And then we hit Boxing Day with Migration from Illumination Studios, Wish from Disney. We've got Aquaman with Jason Momoa. And we've got a art house film called One Life with Anthony Hopkins, which looks fantastic. But that Anthony Hopkins film will probably come in at Matakana about number 7 or 6, in terms of box office. So it just shows what a difference a big batch of films like that will make to our lineup. So that when it does rain over summer, which it may or may not happen, there is another decision or another choice for people who are really time rich at that time of year. Whereas last year it was, okay, we've seen Avatar, we'll go to Puss in Boots, or no, we'll just go and see Avatar again.
Yeah.
But it's still raining, so we'll just stay at home and watch something at home. Cinemas need to have movies that that will draw people in. And I think comparing the 2 summers, last summer and what's coming up this summer, is a pretty good example.
Yeah.
What we're also noticing is that big films are still doing really well. Barbie this year, Top Gun last year. In fact, Top Gun has done a lot more money at Matakana than Barbie has. Quite significant. I was quite surprised at the big difference there. The point being that those big films are still making money. And it used to be that there would be a nice drop-off, a nice little downhill meander through the top films and then the mid-range films and down to the art house and out of lower-performing titles. But what we've noticed in the last year or two is that it's a precipice, like it's off a cliff. The big films, and then there's this sort of big gap where we're just missing a whole lot of quality mid-range titles. And for a cinema, that's hard because the big films draw a lot of film hire, so we do make a lot of money off the films, but a lot of that money goes back out to pay for having those films from a rental perspective. And it's the mid-range films that really, really keep the engine running. They're like the cash cows of the cinema, of a theatre. And so that's where where I'd like to see a lot more development and production. And I do wonder if maybe the relative failure of some really big budget films might make the studios think a little bit about pulling their budgets back and just really squeezing, the most out of good scripts and great directors, but not having a $200 or $300 million budget, having a $80 to $100 million budget, and really maximizing that and focusing on quality stories. And we're missing the likes of Lion and Exotic Marigold Hotel, those kind of films that really, really performed well. We're still seeing films like that, but there are less of them. They're few and far between, and they're the bread and butter of a cinema like ours.